The question, very simply, religious populist rhetoric often segregates society, that is, the faithful versus the unfaithful, or as we talked about the paradigm, us versus them. Now, it has a profound effect on civil society because it can actually destroy the relationship between neighbours, between friends and families. And you hear it, especially on social media at the moment. I don't want my Facebook to have any of you in it because you don't agree with me. After the damage has been done, I ask each and every one of you, are there ways for civil society to heal from such a divisive experience? Who wants to go first? Sophia, you can go first.
Sure, I'll go first. So, why not? Civilization and pluralism are fragile. Towards less divisiveness, we need to create strong and loud alternative narratives. We should engage in using instead of othering, refuse to turn into us and them. Interfaith dialogue helps with this because it helps form ecumenical alliances and also reaching out to the most vulnerable in society to help them feel as though they matter and belong. Fostering alliances between secular organizations helps as well. Instead of focusing on identity politics in our religious communities, I think we need to ask our religious leaders to focus on values and the actual spirituality inside of the texts. We need to find shared values and commonalities with others. And let's call out exclusionary religious discourse when we hear it.
Professor Pratt, you might like to leap in there and show us what the New Zealanders' perspective offers to this discussion.
Well, I mean, New Zealand perspective probably would be coming most clearly with the slogan "They are us," which was, came about following the terror attacks in Christchurch. I mean, that got challenged in some respects, but it was a powerful little statement that basically said, "Look, we're not talking about the others in our society. We're all affected by this. We're all part of it." And I think that was actually a very good signal. It's not quite in the same area as this, because what I was thinking of actually in relation to this question, what came to mind was that the experience of South Africa following the fall of apartheid and the justice and truth reconciliation process. It also leads me to think that a society that is traumatized can heal. Doesn't mean to say it's then perfect. So things are an ongoing process. But coming back to this basic idea that when the damage is done, can a civil society heal? And I think it can, but only through ongoing civil society activities and the processes of reconciliation, education, justice certainly, and dialogue. Which interestingly takes us back to the very first question, the dialogue that involves cross-religious collaboration or cross-communal collaboration, including religious communities. And I think that kind of collaboration certainly can ameliorate some of the impacts of populism and its ongoing antagonisms and so on, especially if the collaboration can appeal to the popular imagination. So that, for example, over against the populism that endeavours to divide, as the way we've been discussing, the promotion of common action in respect to, for example, environmental challenges, planting trees, for example, or whatever, any kind of action whereby people come together and we realise that whatever other identities we have, we're all human beings on this planet facing with all sorts of, ecological crises and so on, but we can work together to ameliorate that. And then, of course, community support and charity in times of crisis. And I think, again, of Christchurch in my own country, both in terms of the terrorist attacks and prior to that, of course, the earthquakes. So you see things like that. And on a wider front, the joint action across communities, across religious communities in particular, to promote peace, as, for example, the World Conference for Religions and Peace, or to combat the injustice, for example, of human trafficking, which was something which has, a while ago, it was, the Vatican, and I think, not sure it was Al-Azhar, but certainly leaders in the Muslim world and the Christian world and the Jewish world came together, and I think other, if I remember rightly, other religious figures too, in order to say we must work against the scourge of human trafficking. So, there are ways that that are already happening, and I think we need to tap into those in order to both combat the effects of the populist divides, as well as to heal where that divide has actually taken root.
Thank you, Douglas. Greg, your thoughts?
Yeah, thinking about this, George, it's hard not to be reminded of John Lennon's Imagine. And of course, in Imagine there's no heaven, Imagine there's no religion. I think, John Lennon, or the song at least, has a very positive impulse, but I think it's correct sentiment and incorrect analysis, because religion can be a force for good or a force for bad. Take away religion, and there's plenty of examples in the last century of human history where without religion, we mentioned before Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge, the most horrible things can happen. Of course, the most horrible things can happen in the name of religion, and many people are scarred by abuse, particularly from religious institutions. But, I'm inspired by looking at the Hizmet, the so-called Gulen movement. They've suffered terrible persecution, very unjust. I mean, the stories coming out of Turkey are really tragic. And yet, one thing that impresses me about this group, I knew it before this sad cycle, but I've watching it in the last half dozen years, they haven't responded with hate. They haven't responded to hate and cynical victimization by fighting back. There's been no violence. And I think that will go a long way to healing Turkish society and healing that particular civil society movement. And I think generally speaking, we can see, when somebody's doing something good for social reform. So we gravitate to the example of Nelson Mandela, who didn't return hate with hate, who came out of prison without bitterness, or at least overcame his bitterness, if he had any. And we can also see that for all the mistakes made by Christians in South Africa, what Desmond Tutu was doing as a leader of the church was a positive thing. So religion can make a positive contribution, but it has to be, religion has to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. And it has to come back to respecting our common humanity and standing up for everyone. And that's the only way to overcome all of these mistakes that drive us apart. And the things that are done in the name of religion, sometimes by religious people, that damage not just society, but also religion itself.